Nick, I am very excited to be talking to you about running. I think probably it might be because my running routine has maybe fallen off in the last like 9 months. Maybe I'm trying to psych myself back up for it for the spring. But particularly for you, because your background is in physiotherapy, I love being able to connect the science to the movement, especially for people who maybe had never have run before, or maybe they're like me hoping to like get back, pick their routine up for the, 67th time.
Sure.
Or maybe they've had an injury and they're a little bit shy about, well, how do I get started again? So maybe we should just start about learning a little bit more about you. Like, tell us about yourself, Nick. Like, how did you get here?
Sure. Very, I'll try to do a shortened version because I have a kind of long history with healthcare in general, but also running, of course. So my background's in physiotherapy, like you mentioned. So been a physiotherapist since 2006. Yeah. So definitely dated myself there a little bit, but that's okay.
I'm right with you.
Yeah, after I graduated from physiotherapy, I practiced for 5 years in a variety of different clinics, I would say, in Vancouver. I wanted to explore as many different types of clinics as possible. So, different, more sports clinics, more older populations, more generic type of orthopedic clinics as well, just to see and understand like how the service was being delivered to different populations. I always like to, you know, cast a wide net at first and then kind of filter in and see what you like. And, I think a lot of people are similar in that way.
Yeah.
I think I found out pretty early on that I wanted to start my own business in physiotherapy. I love physiotherapy, but I would say I'm one of the guys that's definitely destined to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in that environment.
Mhm.
My dad was an entrepreneur. I worked with my dad for probably the majority of my childhood, as well as my, high school years, university years. So, I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So within the first probably 2, 3 years of physiotherapy, I pretty much made the decision that, hey, look, I'm going to get into it by opening up my own practice. I have no background in business other than, my dad and following him around. But, it's an old school business. My dad was owned a grocery store in downtown Vancouver.
Oh, no way. Which grocery store?
It was called West Valley Market in the West End
Oh,
in
okay.
Vancouver. Yeah, it's no longer there. He's retired, and
That's
uh,
amazing.
yeah, but I grew up in that business, and my dad was just your typical kind of hardworking immigrant that didn't have any business background, but it was a family business. He and his brothers opened that grocery store. So very early on, I was exposed to that. And the
Yeah.
part that always intrigued me about business was it was always like the downtime that I spent with everybody. We
Yeah.
we ate lunch together, we ate dinner together. There was somebody there who always cooked for the entire team. So we had maybe
Mm.
20, 30 people in the grocery store. And
That's amazing.
yeah. So there was just nothing like being in a team environment where
Yeah.
it didn't really matter what your role was. Everyone was, trying to grow the business or trying to put food on the table. And so that was a very early kind of, I would say, experience for me that as soon as I got into physiotherapy and started working in clinics, you started to I always wanted to kind of be on the other side pretty early on. So by 2011, I opened up my first practice called Physio Room. This was on Main Street in
Hmm.
Vancouver, BC. Zero experience in business, just didn't know anything about business. um, I knew I liked it, and I knew the type of team culture I wanted to build. So I would say everything I did was around that,
Yeah.
meaning I hired people that I wanted to hang out with. I spent most of my time just ensuring that they were happy, because great team culture builds great businesses.
Mhm.
Everything in between didn't matter that much to me. I figured, you know what, I'm going to learn as we go. But if the staff are happy and they're giving, 1, 2, 3 more % than they're asked to do, then you have a good team culture. If they're
Yeah.
staying a little longer, if they're showing up to work a little bit earlier, so there's a lot of pizzas that I bought for people, a lot of donuts, a lot of coffee runs, the things that as a new startup entrepreneur, I think, are the things that really matter the most, because I don't believe that there's a perfect way to do business, and I don't think people can learn business other than uh, just being in it. And
Yeah.
everyone who's run a business is an expert in business because of their experiences.
I love that perspective because I feel like we're very aligned in that, it didn't take me long as a dietitian to say, I think I want to do something on my own. I also
Yeah,
got my start at a grocery store. That was my first job.
perfect.
And, but I think I constantly second guessed myself. Oh, because I don't know how to run a business and I'm doing everything wrong. I wish I had had that perspective, but being like, yeah, but I'm here and doing it, right? Like what more can I ask of myself?
Yeah, and I think it's not till later in the journey that you start to realize that, because I get often asked, if you kind of knew how this physio business worked earlier on, would you have changed anything um, from the early points to maybe change the outcome of you know like everything that has happened? Uh,
Mm,
and every time I think about it, I always go back to no, I don't think so, because it's part of the journey and learning and kind of screwing up and having wins and losses. I don't think I'll have context to be able to, if you hand somebody a playbook or a manual of how to run the perfect business, it's not going to work
yeah.
because I'm not that person, and we're in a different time, and my team's not your team, and everything is slightly different. So the best way is just to dive in and make sure that team culture is number one. That's like really the only thing that you can impact in the beginning, and everything else you'll figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So going back to that, 2011, figured slowly figured out for quite a few years. I still don't think I'm good in business, by the way. It's just experience after experience. By 2015, two of my staff members wanted to open a clinic, and they came to me. I remember we went for lunch and they asked if I wanted to open the clinic with them or they were going to go do it themselves, type of thing. And it was a very simple, like, let's do it together, you know?
Amazing.
Partly because they're friends of mine. And then the other part is, you know, I always prided myself on the fact that I always want to ensure that I'm building an environment where people can grow. And if I say no to them, then I'm setting a precedent that I'm not willing to kind of take that risk for other people who have really taken a lot of risk to help me succeed. So I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Like, I had no idea what I was doing when I decided to open that second clinic, but it was one of those, hey, let's go along for the ride. So ended up opening a second location. This was on Oak Street, physio room, back in 20, I think it was 2015 that it opened, with two partners. And it was like learning business all over again, to be
Mm,
honest, because now I have partners. I didn't have partners in the first location. So it was very different. That business structure will kind of change how business operates quite quickly, depending on, you know, is a partnership, is it, are you
yeah.
doing it yourself, do you have a bunch of investors, do you, like, it all changes because alignment is key in these scenarios. So I quickly learned that it was just very different, and we spent a lot of time on aligning our goals and making sure that now that becomes like a new culture I'm trying to build, that
Yeah.
the three of us are, you know buying each other coffees and pizzas, you know,
It's
because
your turn for the pizza. No, it's your turn for the pizza.
yeah, it kind of, because same thing. Like I don't know what I'm doing, so I know what I can do, which is we're in this together, and I want you to show up to work a little early, and I want you to stay late to work. And I'm not going to tell you to do that. I want you to want to do that. And the only way you're going to want to do that is if the team culture is amazing and you love the environment you're working in. Pretty simple,
Yeah,
right?
totally. It's a little thing.
it's a little thing. So did that. Eventually figured it out with them, and it was pretty smooth, I would say, all the way up to 2017. End of 2016 and early 2017 is when I met these guys from Toronto. They had a practice called Myo Detox, still have a practice called Myo Detox, and for me it was like an instantaneous kind of thing. I met these guys, and the first thing they said to me was, hey, we want to be the Nike of therapy. And I was like, whoa, nobody's ever said that. I was like, in some ways taken aback by it, but in other ways inspired by it. I was like, wow, that's interesting, because physio is kind of boring. And you just said you want to be the Nike of therapy, which means you want to be a big consumer brand in something that's boring. And to me, that's like a big challenge, right?
Yeah.
So it was literally that first meeting. These two guys just asked if I wanted to join, and it was as simple as that. And then I said no, but then I flew back on the airplane to Vancouver, and I was like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, I like challenges, and I was at the age where I really wanted to prove to myself that I can take on these challenges. And I ultimately thought that long term, for the rest of my team and everyone else, that this was going to open a lot of doors for us collectively if we chose this route. So within probably 3 months, maybe 6 months, 3 to 6 months, I basically said yes without knowing how we're going to do it. And then
Amazing.
couple handshake deals later, we didn't know what we were doing back then. We rebranded the two physio room clinics to be Myo Detox clinics in Vancouver, continue to expand, opened one on Fraser, opened one in Chinatown, then convinced my other friend, who I think Andrew, in North Vancouver, to join us as well. So he converted his clinic in North Vancouver to Myo Detox at that time. And then we opened Kitsilano as well. Throughout this whole time, again, I would say I had no idea really what I was doing, because it's another challenge. It's now you're representing a brand. You have to scale these operations outside of Vancouver. They were expanding in Toronto as well. And then collectively we were expanding in LA together. So new challenges, new things. Fast forward. So I would say all of those experiences, by the way, were just, those taught me, most importantly, what matters in business and what doesn't matter in business. And we went through so many ups and downs through that process. I would never give up any of that. I think all of that was valuable. There was a lot of downs. There were a lot of ups. But go for it.
No, and I was just going to say, it's that commitment to the process, right? That you're in it, and it's not necessarily about that end destination, which I think parallels nicely with the whole running thing, because like constant improvement, very challenging, and like you just got to get used to being in it for the miles.
Exactly. I think in running, it's such in some ways a metaphor for life, right? Like, we tend to want things like quickly. We tend to, go for short-term rewards, and, go for the immediate, things that make you smile and make you happy. But deep down, I think everyone knows that life is not like that, and life is about the long-term rewards, and what happens over time when you really work at it, and consistency and all those kind of things. Um, and again, the truth of like all of this stuff is like the you just need something to chase after.
Mm.
And if you have something to chase after, then you're always going to be kind of in the kind of mix of progress, and in the mix of learning, and in the mix of being goal oriented. I think when we do running, and sign up for the big marathon, and then everyone does the marathon, then after the marathon they're like, what's next? We
Yeah.
should look at these things less as like the big marathon. It's just like one other thing that you want to check off that list, so that you can run hopefully for a very long time, um, and continually do these things, so that one day you can accomplish the ultimate goal of it, which is health.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, talk about something that is a process, not a destination, I think, like and maybe, for anyone listening, obviously, if they press play on this episode, they're at least a little bit intrigued, but maybe running is for them. So if we were gonna, sell why running over other sports, like, can we talk a little bit about the physical and mental benefits of running? Like what's in it for me? Like, why am I gonna lace up and get out the door?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of have my own philosophy on a lot of
Mm.
these things, which I think like most people that look at running or sport or any sort of physical activity, there's like an obvious benefit. If you break down physical benefit and mental benefit, number one, if you really just kind of boil it down to what it is, to me, the physical benefit of running is about training your heart, your lungs. It's, in other words, like physical capacity,
Yeah.
right? And the way to measure that, the easiest way to measure that, at least to think about it, is oxygen. It's just oxygen in your body. And if you're thinking about consumption as the kind of indicator of physical health, and being the goal is to lower the oxygen consumption at higher physical exertion, right? Doing more or doing things that are harder, and I'm consuming less oxygen to do that, should, in my opinion, be a goal for every human that exists, because it just allows you to do more things in the world, and for
Yeah.
potentially longer periods of time, right?
Well, and the idea here then is efficiency, essentially. So, like the efficiency of your physical. Is this when when we talk about like VO2 max? Is this what we're talking about?
You could, VO2 max would be one way to measure oxygen consumption, but you can measure oxygen consumption through heart rate. You can do a lot of correlations around heart and lungs as
Yeah.
being kind of your two main pillars of, when I'm out there running, I want to keep my heart rate at a certain level, so that my body can sustain a longer period of doing this one thing. And then tomorrow I want to do that a little bit better than the last day, type of thing. And everyone that I talk to around, like, so, like, why should I run? Why should I run? Like, it sucks. It like it hurts. To there's there's a few things, like, outside of just, because you can also do physical exertion through other sports, right? You can play basketball, which is, my background is in basketball, but you could play tennis, you could go to gym, you could go to classes, you could ride a bike. There's a lot of different things that you can do that's not running.
Mhm.
I look at running as like a really core movement in the body. It's something that, as humans, we evolve into. We don't learn to do it.
Mhm.
So as we develop, we learn to take a step, and we learn to walk, and we learn to start to walk faster, and then jog, then run. When you compare that to sport and basketball and hockey and golf, and those are all creations of activities
Yeah.
that are learned activities. They're skill based activities. Not to say you can't get better at running, but at the
Yeah.
baseline, humans are evolved into running. So at the baseline, everyone can do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's number one. So from an accessibility standpoint, it's already there. So meaning the barrier to entry is got to be the lowest.
Yeah. You need shoes.
Yeah, and so in some areas in the world, maybe not even,
Yeah. True. True. Totally. Yeah.
right? But you need very little to start running. And if the goal is the same in terms of physical capacity and decreasing oxygen consumption and heart rate and improving VO2 max and all those things, then at least in running, it's easier to get into and maybe potentially easier to do it on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why I got into running is because I couldn't play basketball anymore. Not because I physically can't play basketball anymore, but I just didn't have courts or friends to play basketball with anymore at my age. And I wanted to have some level of exercise on a daily basis. So running is that much more accessible. And I feel like can serve the purpose from a physical capacity in a similar, I wouldn't say the exact same way, but in a similar way to why I was doing things like basketball, for instance.
Yeah.
Other aspects of basketball I love better, of course, but in running, if you're just breaking down to like the kind of building blocks, well, it's more accessible. On the second part of this, which is mental benefit, well, now you're no longer training your heart and your lungs, you're really training your brain, right? So now you're talking about mental capacity. And this was in my like experiences more the unlock of running, right? Because unlike team sports, which I grew up playing, which was 5-on-5 basketball where I'm on a team where I have a role and there's certain plays we had to really coordinate what we're trying to do to get a basket. Basketball was very cerebral.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on the court playing with your friends, the only thing you could think about is what's happening on that court. I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it's very, there's a lot of critical thinking happening when you're playing that sport.
Yeah.
When I run, I would say it's almost, well, it is the polar opposite. It's way less cerebral. You have the freedom to think about whatever you want to think about, which is a huge unlock for, I wouldn't even say because I'm an entrepreneur. I would say actually more because I'm a father now. But just being able to explore creativity and not have to critically think. And if I wanted to critically think, I could choose to do that. On the court, you didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
You just have to think about the game and the next play. And I got to get more baskets in this team and they're doing better. So I got to play better defense and I got to talk to my team. There's just so many things going on. When I go out for a run, it's like today I might want to listen to a podcast. Tomorrow I might want to listen to just nature. Like there's so much happening there that gives you freedom to think.
It's one of the reasons I think that I love, I'm deeply introverted and really comfortable with like alone time. I like being alone with myself plenty, particularly now that I am a parent, like even more so. But I think it's one of the things that I've always appreciated about running. One, that even if something is bothering me horribly, and if I am dealing like with a horribly anxious day, when I run, the thoughts happen, but there's no, it's almost like you can't grasp the thoughts in the same way. Like the thoughts just sort of like, they come, they go, you're a little bit more detached from, like, it's almost meditative in the way that for me personally, it changes the way that I think. So you can think things through. And I find that you can have those like flashes of insight, be like, whoa, okay. I've been like worrying about this thing for days now. And I just had this breakthrough thought. Then I'm like, oh, okay, now we're good. Like that for me is such a huge, probably more than the physical. I feel similarly. I feel like the mental has always been the most beneficial aspect for me too.
Yeah, I would say like in running, you're training your mental more than you're training your physical unless you're like actually training for like a race or whatever. 99% of my runs are training mental capacity, not physical capacity. And a lot of my friends will tell you that I probably shouldn't be running as much as I run, because it's like, maybe not great for my body, but I know it's great for my mind, right? And if I don't do it, then I feel like I don't feel like mentally I show up the same way. And again, being a father now, and being also an entrepreneur that um, has teams of people that I work around, I want to show up the best version all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So running has really unlocked a lot of that for me, I would say, more than the physical side. The physical side for sure. I think I've gotten better at running over time. Um, but some days don't feel like I'm advancing physically.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've gotten worse over time at running.
Sure.
Probably because definitely I'm not approaching things in the right way, says the woman who just admitted she hasn't probably run since June, maybe, and it's
Oh,
November
wow.
right now.
We got to get you back
So
out there.
we've got to get me back out there. And, for anyone who's completely new to running, understanding that there is a significant physical component, this is an impact activity.
Mhm.
What do people need to think about before they get started? So they're like, this sounds amazing. I need to clear my head. I need to get my cardiovascular fitness back. I want to run. Oh, what do I do? Should we maybe talk to a physio? Should we talk to a doctor? Like, what are the things we need to think about? Equipment, all that kind of stuff.
So you're talking about new, like
New,
brand new,
new. Yeah.
new. Got it. I think honestly, the first thing, because everyone gets caught up in the things that don't matter that much, is to forget about pace. Number one, as the starting point, and focus on time. I do this every morning, um, which is I focus on just a time period that I'm outside.
Mm.
So whether it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, it doesn't actually matter if you're walking, jogging, running, or even taking a break. It's the commitment to be outside for that period of time. And you can run the entire time and run really fast. But if you want to do it consistently and enjoy it, I think focusing on time allows you to remove the side that often runners feel, like they had a bad day, which is, man, I'm not going fast today, or I can't hit my pace, or why am I so slow and my friend's so fast? Just so number one is just commit to time. It's like, how much time can you commit to this sport? And that could be 30 minutes a week. It could be 30 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment. But to me, like running and walking are very much similar because it's gait.
Mm.
One is a little slower and one is a little bit faster because it's just a spectrum, right? Like
Yeah.
you walk and you sprint on the opposite end, which is the fastest way you can run. And there's everything in between. So over the 30-minute time period that you're outside, just do something in that spectrum, then you're essentially running. And very quickly, what you'll find is your physical and mental capacity will increase, especially as a new runner. And the things that you didn't love about running that made you stop before, you'll quickly realize that you actually love it more than you do because you've committed to it for longer than, say, a week or 2 weeks or whatever that is. Because often new runners quit because they're going out there and they're on Strava and all their friends run a certain pace and they can't believe they're running so slow. And even at the slow pace compared to their friends, they're gassed and they feel like terrible and everything hurts. And how can somebody possibly enjoy this? And if you're doing that, a few days, you're probably gonna quit. That doesn't sound very pleasant.
Yeah. Well, and I think like understand, know thyself, because knowing your personality and what motivates you. A great example for me at this stage in my life, I hate metrics. I hate them. Another mutual friend of ours, Zach, was like, why are you not on Strava? Get on Strava. I got on Strava, which, for if you haven't heard of it, is this running app. And I went in and I was like, oh, no, ick. No, no. I don't want to know exactly how long I
Totally.
ran, how far I ran. I don't want to know my pace, because instantly for me, whereas for another person, they might say, oh, well, maybe I'll try and do just like slightly better tomorrow. And that might be super motivating for them, or it could be super unmotivating for them.
Yeah, and well, to back to that point around like, wanting to do some maybe a little bit better than you did yesterday. When you set time goals, then that's an easy metric to follow, because today I did 5 minutes, maybe tomorrow I'll do 6 minutes or 7 minutes. It really doesn't matter how fast you're doing it. You're just committing to more of it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's helped me a lot because I do run every morning, and I have a pretty like dedicated schedule in terms of time. So when it's focused on that, then it's easy for me to commit to it going outside, because it's easy to quit after I don't feel really good running at a certain pace. But if it's like, well, it's kind of like setting a meeting. If there's 45 minutes in that meeting, I could, it's blocked off. That's what I'm
Yeah.
doing. So if I already put my shoes on, I've got my gear on, and I'm outside, I'm not going to quit after 15 minutes. I'll just walk for the remainder of the time.
And, for someone who's getting started, I think that's such valuable advice, because if it seems, oh, well, I do have 30 minutes, but I don't think I can run for 30 minutes. Well, go run as slow as you want for as long as you want. And then whatever's left, walk it.
Walk it, or even you take a break. You're still
Yeah.
outside. That's way more of a commitment than being in bed in the morning. Breathe, breathe the air. Like, it's not that complicated. So, but again, what most people, beginners, will find is pretty quickly they're running for that whole 30 minutes, right? Because they're, it's the learning curve of most things, right? When it's a new stimulus, you tend to improve quite quickly, and then you will plateau, right?
Yeah.
And when you plateau, that's when you start to question, like, I don't understand why I'm not getting faster, or I'm running so much. And, so that's when step two, I would say, is then you're, really, number one, asking yourself why you're doing this, right? Like, why are you running, or why are you trying to run every day? you know and I will always lean on the fact that health should always be one of the pillars. You're running because of health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's physical or mental or a combination of the two, you're running because of health, so that you can do more in life and spend more time doing those things you love, right? And when you start thinking of things like heart rate and oxygen consumption, it translates to other activities in life. Do you want to come home from work feeling like crazy tired, or do you want to come home from work feeling energetic so you can spend time with your kids? Well, what you're doing 30 minutes a day outside is going to help you do that, right? So focus on that. Focus on what you're trying to accomplish from a life perspective, not the run perspective. You don't have to go run, you know, all the marathons in the world and qualify for Boston, like what elite runners want to kind of categorize as, like making you a good runner or like a runner. Just focus on the things you want to do in life, and everyone has different things that they do want to do in life, and that is mental and physical.
Yeah.
That's one. And then number two is, now that you know why you're doing it, then, set actual goals for yourself, because I do think consistency, the two things I always learn from being outside every morning, um, over the long term, is number one is consistency, and number two is just doing hard things and accomplishing those hard things. And when you do those things a lot, you'll be completely surprised at how much it unlocks in your life, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
showing up every single day to do the thing you set out to do. So, identifying those things, is going to be step two. You know your purpose. Now, what are you actually going to do about it? And then
Yeah.
step three is, now that you know what you're going to do, is how you're actually going to go do that. So, do I have the physical ability to do that? Do I have we can talk about gear and the proper shoes and all those kind of things. Do I have an exercise program that's going to help me do, those things are all going to be important, right? But
Mm.
step one is just, identifying like why you're doing it, and setting out like a plan for you to actually go do it, and then committing to it.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Definitely both like as a health professional, but also at this age, I am convinced that consistency is the secret sauce to everything.
100% with you.
I think fitness and nutrition have a parallel in that many people will come to them for aesthetic first reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it's that sort of like all or nothing. I'm in it for 2 weeks and then I'm like out and falling apart. Whereas like the magic of just saying, you know what can I do in 6 months? What can I do in a year? Why am I doing it? First and foremost, but then, well, maybe I'm not going to go to the gym for 2 hours a day or like attempt to run a marathon in 4 months, but instead I am going to commit. I want to become a runner.
Mm-hmm.
I want to experience that level of commitment and consistency in my life and see how much stronger that makes me both physically and mentally.
Totally.
Yeah, I love that. I want to shift a little bit for, maybe someone like me, I don't know, but like someone who, maybe they haven't, maybe it's been more than a few months, maybe they used to be a runner 5 years ago. Maybe they had an injury, for example, and they're like, I really used to love it and it feels like it would be great right now. But like, what do I need to think about? Or maybe you're also like me in my 40s and you maybe have a little bit more of a physical component, things you need to think about from a muscle perspective or flexibility or just injury prevention.
Yeah. So
It's like 75 million questions. Good luck.
It's a lot of questions, but I'll try to break it down. So number one, I think I always like to simplify things because I think the body's very complex. Number one,
Yeah.
If you actually like try to understand the body and anatomy and how it all works together, it's very complex to the point where I don't think we'll ever fully understand it. Right?
True.
Which can be very daunting as a somebody trying to get back into running. So I always think simplifying things is the best because like if you can create some sort of a philosophy or a system around the body that makes sense to people, then they're more likely to utilize that to actually do the exercises. And this comes a lot, of course, from my experience being a physio for the last 18 years, is the more you simplify things and the simpler your programs are, the higher chance that that person will actually buy into it because they get it. Because most physios have a really tough time explaining the why behind the 7 exercises that I'm prescribing you today. And the truth is most people aren't going to do it. Not because they don't want to. I think they realize it's probably good for them, but unless they, feel something immediately, or if it's like one thing that they could like maybe do in front of the TV at night type of thing, they probably won't, because that's a commitment that they're going to have to now carve out 30 minutes of their day, set up a mat on the floor where they have, 2 kids running around. It's just not going to happen. Right? Mm-hmm. Realistically, it's not going to happen. So I always like to look at things in a simple way. So in a running perspective, number one is, we like to focus a lot on individual body parts like my ankle or my knee or my hip or my back or if you start to like isolate things and break things up into different body parts, it already complicates everything, right? Because I run, like, let's just say I run and my knee hurts. Something's wrong with my knee. No, not really. The knee's just telling you something, right? It's telling you that it doesn't like.
Yeah.
Why does it not like it? Is it because the knee is hurt, or maybe because there's something else in the body that's not working perfectly, so that the knee's maybe taking more weight or absorbing more of the forces, things like that. So I always like to look at the body as like a fully, just it's one system, right? And if you're going out there for a run, the best thing is always thinking about, does the right side of my body do the same as the left side of my body? Number one, because running to me is like, it's just symmetrical, which why I kind of got into running so much is it's actually easier to assess than a sport,
Hmm.
because in a sport you're using one arm or one leg or it's just way more complicated because asymmetry is part of the sport. In running, it's as symmetrical as you can get it. And I actually used to tell people the easiest way to assess running is, we'll make sure it's like a safe environment, but close your eyes and like try to run in a straight line. And the likelihood is you'll either end up on the right or you'll end up on the left, because the body always uses the visual cue to adjust. If I got to run in a straight line, I'll do whatever it takes to run in a straight line. My body knows how to adapt and adjust. But if I close my eyes and remove the visual of a straight line, now you're relying on the rest of your body to interpret what a straight line is. And if the right side of my body is doing something different than the left side of my body, then you're not going to run a straight line. You're going to run either way to the right or way to the left, right?
Yeah.
So step one is just going for runs and then feeling the difference between right and left. Does my right side feel tighter than my left side? Does it feel more painful? Does something feel just a little off
Yeah.
compared to the left side? And step one is going to be, how do I create more symmetry in my body first, as opposed to absolute movements like my ankle has to move so much and my foot has to, flatten this much or push off this much. Number one is just pure symmetry. The right side and the left side of the body should be doing pretty much the same thing.
Hmm.
Once you have that, then I would say there's kind of baselines that um, I usually look for in depending on how fast or how slow your goal running pace is.
Okay.
So if you break down the three things that are important, and it's often typically I would program exercises this way as well, is number one is flexibility. Does your muscles, joints, and other tissues in the body, again, body can be really complex, but muscles and joints, most individuals understand, can they, at the bare minimum, when you're not running, even accomplish the movement that is necessary to run, right? And in the legs, it's, you'll like, people will understand like, how much does your hip need to like extend backwards to push off, how much does my ankle need to flex forward to be able to go over my foot without turning out my foot. So at the bare minimum, it's just flexibility. Can your body even do it? Once you clear up all the flexibility, cool, now my body can actually do the required movements for running at the pace I want to do. Because if you want to run faster, you can imagine how much more flexibility you would need. If you look at sprinters, you can quickly see how much their hamstring, they're,
Yeah.
like, it's going far. And then you take it to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is really walking. You don't require a lot of flexibility because the movements are in a very short range, right?
Hmm.
So flexibility first. Then once you have the requirements from a flexibility standpoint, then it's just strength. Within the range that you need, can I strengthen the movements so that it could sustain more power so that I could push off harder, or the amount of steps that you want to do if I'm going to be running, let's say, a marathon,
Yeah.
because 40, 50,000 steps is much different than 5,000 steps or 10,000 steps, right? So there's going to be a strength requirement in there. Just because you're flexible enough doesn't mean you can sustain that amount of steps, right? At the pace that you want to go. So check flexibility. Number two, check strength. And then number three, which is a part that I don't think most people think about as much, is a category I call adaptability. Adaptability is, to me, is the fun stuff, right? Because that's everything and anything under the sun. And that's to ensure that the flexibility and the strength that you have in your body to accomplish that run at that pace that you want to do can be translated into any environment or condition or stress level or anything um, that you want to accomplish, right? Because just because you have flexibility and strength, well, does that change when you run in the morning compared to running at night? I think
Mm.
it does, because your stress levels are different, right? I run in the morning because I'm not as stressed. I like to start my day with a win, right? Because as you would know as well, being an entrepreneur and a parent means you often don't win
For most of the day.
for most of the day. So I want to be up before I start my day. I want to start my day 1-0, meaning I'm up one, right? Because I don't want to check my email yet, right? I
Yeah.
don't, because a lot can bring that one down to 0 and then -1, So the end of my day runs are going to be very different than the start of my day runs,
Mm-hmm.
because my mental capacity is completely different on opposite ends of the day, right? So
Yeah.
when I say adaptability, it doesn't always mean physical capacity. It's also mental capacity. Are you training at multiple times in the day? That's one, right? But are you training in cold conditions compared to hot conditions? Are you training in the trails compared to road? Because these are all different conditions,
Yeah.
right? Which require different types of training, right? So summarize: flexibility, right? Baseline.
Yeah.
Strength, number 2. And again, it's ordered this way because you need to be flexible before you can strengthen what you're capable of doing. Once you have those, great. Now you can do that goal in a very specific condition. Now let's adapt that to all types of conditions, so that doesn't matter what footwear you wear, doesn't matter what terrain you're on, doesn't matter what time of day it is, how old you are, you're just going out there and you can do it all, right? So
Yeah.
flexibility, strength, adaptability, that's how I like to look
I
at
love
these
that.
things.
And I want to ask you about Run Ready, because I think this is a good time, because if someone is feeling like they do need, they've gone out and they're like, I'm going to give this a go. They're a month in and they're like, I feel like maybe this isn't feeling right. Like maybe there's something else. Like maybe my hips are off. Like maybe something is up and I need to go see a physio.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about how you're marrying the physio side and the running side with Run Ready.
Sure. So Run Ready is a new project, and one that's really close to my heart because it blends and integrates a lot of my passions, actually. So obviously, physiotherapy is one of my passions. Number 2 is running, but number 3 is business solutions, because I do look at myself as an entrepreneur, and you know, building something that's solving a problem not just for myself and my business, but solving a problem that I feel can be used by other physios around the world is something I'm super passionate about. So again, Run Ready is a software platform that integrates physiotherapy with running footwear as well as running exercise programs. So in essence, it's a 3-step kind of um, way to deliver a experience or a service. Step 1 is what we call assess, and not too different than how physios typically assess. We just standardized how it's done. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a movement assessment and a treadmill assessment. So in the movement assessment, it's currently 20 movements that we assess how well your body moves in flexibility, strength, adaptability, of course, um, through all the necessary requirements in running. Pretty simple.
Cool.
After that, you would get a treadmill assessment, because treadmill assessment allows us to see how well it's all integrated when you actually get on a treadmill and put it all together. Does your right side of your body and the left side of the body actually coordinate to do it symmetrically? After that, then you basically get a score. And the score is quite simple in design, quite complicated in the back end of it. But essentially all it is a score to tell you how well your body absorbs, which means how well your body absorbs shock, so going
Mhm.
downwards. Number two is how well your body bounces, so how well your body goes up. And then number three is stability, so how well your body stabilizes, right? So absorb, bounce, stability, you get a score essentially out of 100, from 0 to 100, each of these things. And in that, we look at that and go, cool, now we have essentially a prescription for you to take to a local run store. And in that run store, they can look at that information and interpret that, because it's a language system that they understand. And me and so my business partner Rob, who is more on the run specialty side, so we've for years, me from a physio side, him from run specialty side, have worked together. That when I see clients that do assessments with me at physio room and then later on at my detox, I would write a little, prescription pad thing for him, where I would, write a couple, maybe like things to look out for from an injury perspective, and then maybe some recommendations from footwear perspective, like maybe better cushioning, or maybe a higher stack, or heel drop this or that. And that would be given to the client, and the client would bring that to the run specialty store. And Rob would look at that prescription and then interpret that information and hopefully fit that individual with the footwear that's recommended to them.
Yeah.
But to me, that is very different than a doctor writing a prescription for medication. When the client brings that prescription to the pharmacist, there's nothing to interpret. It's very black and white. That pharmacist will fill the order. They wouldn't recommend things, because the language system is very easy to understand from a doctor to a pharmacist.
Mhm.
And for us, it's like, no, like depending on how much footwear knowledge I have from a physio perspective, which most don't, because it's really hard to keep up with footwear. There's a lot of footwear out there.
Yeah.
And then depending on how much physio or anatomy knowledge Rob has, he's pretty good at it, but it's depends on the store and depends on the training that they do. Everything in between is just ambiguous, right? You have no idea what shoes that person will end up with when they come back for their follow-up visit, where
Mhm.
they'll bring the pair of shoes and, oh, that's not really what I thought you were going to get, but that's okay. So essentially, after the assessment process of Run Ready, they would get that, which is the score. That score is supposed to be interpreted by a local run store to fit them with the proper shoes based on the inventory that they have, because that language is understandable by them. Because absorb, bounce, and stability are the same language systems that they use in footwear, which is cushioning, energy return, and how supportive and stable shoes are. So that's step two, which is our match side of the three-step process. And then the third piece is prescribe, which is actually an exercise program that we've spent the last 18 months basically filming exercises so we can create programming through a library for that individual. So a three-step kind of service and experience for runners that we hope can really help kind of open doors for physios to really be able to use this as a tool to, create better comfort and performance for runners around the world.
Yeah. That's incredible. And I do want to talk about shoes just a little bit too. I mean, there's like millions of shoes out there, but I do want to say, for anyone new to running, don't go to the big box store. Go to a running store. It is night and day, the level of knowledge that you will get. And it's not only the most expensive shoes at running stores. So there are shoes for every budget too. I just, like, as a runner, it's like, I have to put that out there in the
Of
universe. Like,
course.
it will change your life.
Yes. Of course I agree. But yeah, so we have a running store on West 4th. run specialty store called Run As You Are. Run Ready is kind of the health brand of Run As You Are. So it's the same team that's working on both of these companies right now. But of course, like at a run specialty store, you have run specialists, and run specialists are trained a certain way to be able to fit you properly with footwear. And to your point, there's a wide range of footwear from entry level all the way to, obviously the most elite type of runners. Buying the most expensive shoes will not make you faster. I will tell you that right now. Because there's again, until you do a proper assessment on somebody, it's easy to just go to a run store and say, I want that shoe because it has a carbon plate, and I heard from these brands that that's supposed to make you faster, and all the top athletes are wearing carbon plated shoes. There's a lot of research that's going into these things right now around how fast you actually have to be to even get the benefits from that carbon plate, for instance, because at a certain pace, that if you're not hitting that threshold, it actually not only doesn't help you, it actually negatively impacts you. Right. And again, how do all these studies test these things? Often through oxygen consumption, because you're consuming more oxygen at a slower pace with the super shoes than you would be in what most people would kind of classify as like, not the best shoes for running.
Yeah.
Right. Why? Because at a slower pace, you during your kind of gait cycle and running cycle, you go through more of the full range in your foot. A carbon plate doesn't allow you to do that. A carbon plate actually restricts you from going through that full range. It's really meant for people that are going quite fast, so that they're not actually going through the full cycle, because they're essentially landing on their midfoot to their forefoot, and they're using it like a springboard to kind of just jump back and forth. When you're going that fast, that's what you're doing for the whole distance. When you're going slower, like myself, you don't do that. So then that carbon plate actually just restricts your gait cycle.
Yeah,
Feels
that's
awkward.
Good. Yeah, but it's really good advice, because I think particularly if you're into gear, and I may or may not live with someone who loves gear, and the first step on any new journey for them is like, oh, give me the gear. And you're like, well, but all the fanciest stuff might not actually be right for you at this moment in your journey. And I want to ask before we move into the rapid fire too. So in terms of, because you did mention flexibility, if someone can't get to a physio to tailor a program for themselves, and let's say it's so hard to generalize in health, but I'm going to force you to do it anyways. But let's say someone is going out and they're like, I am going to commit to 30 minutes 3 times a week. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to run, walk. I'm going to try and get faster. I'm going to try and run more of it. In terms of strength and flexibility, how do those pieces show up for them? Should they stretch for 10 minutes after every run, or is yoga once a week important? How would you add those strength and flexibility pieces for just a newbie runner just trying to get into it?
I mean, I always go back to doing something is better than nothing, right? So really any program is good, because it's always better than doing nothing. If you want to be specific, obviously I always recommend you go see, a physiotherapist or an expert in that, because to be specific in programming, you really have to assess somebody to know what is suitable for this person. As a generalization, what I will say is the majority of the people are in a flex position, because we sit all day, we are on our phones all day, on laptops all day. So in general, it doesn't apply to everyone. Yeah. You want to do exercises, stretches, and strengthening in the opposite direction, because it'll open up your body, right? The goal is always to be balanced in both directions, because in running, much like it is in other sports, you flex and extend So you go both directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every step you go from landing to push off to landing to push off. So everyone is already stretched into landing. So flexion movements. So, if you sit all day, I always recommend people just like bend the other way. So like lie on your stomach and, do cobra stretch. Like, of course, like if you're in pain or whatever, you should go see somebody.
Yes.
I never
Yeah,
want to
this is
give
just
like
for like someone who wants to be preventative and wants to make sure that they're doing things right.
yeah, it's bang for your buck is do opposite to what you normally do. Like if you look at a sitting position, you're essentially bending forward all day.
Yeah.
Right? So do the opposite. Like stand at work once in a while. Like just, do a little back bend here and there. Like it will open up your body like you won't believe. And when you go for a run, it'll free your movement. You still got to strength train and do all that, but your first, few minutes out there, you'll probably feel a lot more free in your movement. Like, wow, I feel taller. I feel like a little lighter on my feet.
Yeah.
All of those things, right?
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So really, I mean, it's really just like something is better than nothing. If you are going to run, you can't abandon flexibility and strength. Try and do movements that oppose what you typically do, and you'll feel better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And immediately before is always a good thing, right? It's, a lot of times people hear like you just, you do the stretching afterwards type of thing. It's not really stretching. You can call it like movement prep. It's probably an easier way to think about it. Meaning like right before you run for like 5 minutes, just do like a few movements that are opposing what you did that day. So if you were sitting all day, just do a few things, go in the opposite direction, stretch out your hip flexors, open up your back,
Mm-hmm.
like things like that. And then go for a run. And then, of course, stretching after is good for recovery. But a lot of people go from couch to run. Yeah, and I do sometimes too. And then what happens is, everyone feels a very similar thing. Like they take the first 5 minutes to like kind of work out the kinks before they feel smooth.
Totally.
Yeah, what if you just felt smooth immediately?
What a concept. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Okay. So we should actually prep a little bit for movement before running. That's a big take home for me that I've been ignoring for years, for
Yes,
sure.
definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. This has been so awesome. I want to move into the rapid fire questions, just 5 little getting to know you questions. So, first one, Sunday mornings, up and at 'em or take it slow?
Take it slow.
Yeah.
Take it slow.
How old is your child?
3 and a bit.
So as slow as you can with a 3.5-year-old.
Yeah. It's all relative. So
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Gadgets, fancy stuff doesn't matter. But is there one running gadget or merch item that you really can't live without right now?
Yeah, I mean, I never want to specify on specific product, but I would say there's a specific pair of shoes that I think changed my life. And I would say a lot of the brands are kind of going this direction anyways, because they've now discovered that you want to create a shoe that's almost like suitable for slow and fast, because similar to what I was mentioning before with like time, you just don't know whether it's a fast day or a slow day. So why don't you get a shoe that can do both? So the shoe that I am really loving these days is the Asics Super Blast 2. Really hard to get, by the way, because it sells out immediately.
Yeah.
But that shoe has changed my life for sure. The technology in it is next level, I think.
All right. I've mostly run on Asics for the 20 years that I've been an on and off runner, and they're all of a sudden very hype. I do find sometimes I'm like, whoa. I always used to think here I am in my Asics because I'm a nerd running, and now they're cool. I love it. I love that for us.
Come back.
Yeah. Okay. If you knew you were about to sit down to the last meal you were ever going to have on Earth, what would it be?
Ooh, last meal ever. I think it has to be sushi. Yeah, sushi is my favorite thing to eat. Yeah.
Awesome. Favorite music to run to?
I don't run to music.
Oh,
Yeah, because I find
podcasts?
I'm a podcast guy for sure because music affects your pace. And because I'm a time guy, I don't want it to make me go slow or fast. It should
Yeah,
make me feel like, it's my choice. Um, so I'm definitely a podcast guy for sure for running.
amazing. I'm very much a music person for running, probably
Mhm.
to my detriment because I never really thought about that. Like, why am I so tired today? Oh, I ran way faster than normal because of what I was listening to. It's a
Right.
pretty good tip. Okay. Last one. If money were no object, where would you hop on a plane to next?
I would say, I mean, it's always Japan. It's always Japan. Yeah. I was trying to think of something that's really expensive, but it just goes back to Japan anyways.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite place because I find it's the most like technologically advanced in every way. So it's interesting, but it also respects the history of
Yes.
the culture of Japan. So you kind of get both ends. You could go straight into Tokyo and get all the interesting thing and just take it all in from like the tech advancement side, and then you can go to another part of Japan and kind of you know respect the traditions to the point of like they are really rooted in history. So I don't think you could beat Japan. It's my favorite place in the world. Yeah.
No. It is also one of my favorite. I spent a lot of time there in my formative years, and I love it. If I could afford to, I would go to Tokyo every single year.
The same. It is quite expensive. So
Yeah. Well,
yes, I would
travel
as well.
anywhere, and then the more kids you have, especially once
Yes.
you have to pay for their seats. I have two who need their own
Yes.
seats, and that's everything's double.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Nick, thank you so much for just sharing everything about like who you are and how you came to running, but also just really helping us get into a different mindset about running. And I think that's what I like about this conversation so much is that it is about like choosing to do something to make yourself feel good, to commit to something.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and it's fun to have these conversations.